Right. There is it. Yeah. Yes. Mm. There is it. I started taking notes, and what I what I thought, because it's a long thing. I'm going to take some notes, and I think I like literally like I just thought all the important stuff, and then I think I copied the whole thing down.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Before you realize it, you're like, oh,
Yeah,
everything he said
yeah.
is like pretty important. Yeah, this is one thing that I love about
Hmm.
us having gone through all of the different propaganda from eco-fascists and
God, yeah, yeah.
whatever that last person was. Um, is then when you go back and you read something legitimate,
That's
it
actually
sounds so
good.
good.
Yes. Like his
Yeah.
vision of how society should be structured. It's like, yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Hmm.
No serfdom and no like weird fashy stuff. None of
Yeah,
that.
yeah. No,
It's just
no degrowth. I don't think he says degrowth
nope,
one time,
nope, nope.
but
Actually, he like actually I think it's at one point says like overpopulation is not actually a problem. So he's not a degrowther. Definitely not.
yeah, yeah. I'm I'm
Oh,
trying to read because there's a section here labeled "Grow or Die."
oh yeah.
Yeah,
Um, Nature and society,
yeah. It's around page 6.
social hierarchy, idea. Yeah. Grow or die. Here we are.
Right there. Boom. Yeah, I enjoy this section quite a lot. There's some interesting theory in here,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, I don't know. It's not
Should I
it's not
read a bit of it?
degrowth.
Yes,
Hmm?
no. Should I read a bit of it?
Um, there's there's a section on page 8, right toward the end of the Grow or Die section.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of the last two paragraphs.
Okay.
I I think that's probably about the best part to
Mm-hmm.
sort of address his position on growth and degrowth and sort of system limitations.
Okay. So I'm just going to go for it. A society based on the law of grow or die, as its all-pervasive imperative, must of necessity have a devastating impact on first nature. Nor does growth here refer to population growth. The current wisdom of population boomers, to the contrary, the most serious disruptors of ecological cycles are found in the large industrial centers of the world, which are not only poisoning water and air but producing the greenhouse gases that threaten to melt the ice caps and flood vast areas of the planet. Suppose we could somehow cut the world's population in half. Would growth and the despoliation of the earth be reduced at all? Capital would insist that it was indispensable to own two or three of every appliance, motor vehicle or electronic gadget, where one would more than suffice, if not be too many. In addition, the military will continue to demand ever more lethal instruments of death and devastation, of which new models would be provided annually. Nor would softer technologies, if produced by a grow or die market, fail to be used for destructive capitalistic ends. 2 centuries ago, large forested areas in England were hacked into fuel for iron forges, with axes that had not changed appreciably since the Bronze Age. Uh, and ordinary sails guided ships laden with commodities to all parts of the world well into the 19th century. Indeed, much of the United States cleared its forests, wildlife, and aboriginal inhabitants with tools and weapons that could have easily been recognized, however much they were modified by Renaissance people centuries earlier. What modern techniques did was accelerate a process that has been well underway since the close of the Middle Ages. It cannot be held solely responsible for the endeavors that were underway for centuries. It essentially abetted damage. It essentially abetted damage caused by the ever-expanding market system, whose roots in turn lay in one of history's most fundamental societal transformations: the elaboration of a system of production and distribution based on exchange rather than complementarity and mutual aid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously, Bookchin also makes up words every once in a while. But yeah, I just like this as a different solution to the growth or degrowth sort of problem, or at least the myth of a problem. It sort of, yeah, like you said, it refocuses the issue not on, you know, the resource volume within the ecological system, but rather on their distribution. You know, it's
and it's
a pretty good way.
Yeah. It's so true what he says about, like, you know, if there was only half the population, they would just advertise that you should have 2 or 3 of everything.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, I think in the 90s they started this thing like no, you can't have 1 car per household, you need 2. And now, like, I think my mom or someone said to me, like advertisement used to be like, hey, you need a washing machine, we make the best kind of washing machine. And these days advertisements are like, here is a reason why you need this thing we make.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, you know, when he talks about growth in this grow or die system, society, he's talking about economic growth and profit.
Yeah, yeah.
And the idea in our system is that unless you're doing better this year than you were last year, and unless you will do better next year than you do this year, then whatever venture you're involved in is inefficient.
Yeah. I mean, so just by necessity with inflation, like if a business has 1 year where it sells X amount of products to Y amount of people, and the next year it sells exactly the same amount of product to exactly the same amount of people, that second year will have been worse because of inflation. Like the money that they get will be worth less. So yeah, you always, like, even to just to stay in place, you have to grow.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just inflation, but like also the idea of being able to reinvest in your business. If you own a small business and you want to get like a small business loan, and this is just part of capitalism, they want to make sure that not only is your business profitable, but also it's growing.
Yeah.
So that the amount of money the bank invests into the system, they make a profit on by investing in a growing business. And that whole dichotomy really is what fuels all of the quote unquote system inefficiencies, like, you know, environmental collapse and, you know, other such externalities.
Yeah. Do you know what he means by softer technologies?
He means deindustrialization.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's sort of a nod to the anti-civ trends, at least the valid forms of anti-civ trends. Yeah. Because first, even if we only use hand tools, then the capitalist system still requires a growing market and a profitable market. So
first, I was thinking soft technologies means, like, you know, not weapons.
No, it means not industrial tools.
Oh, okay.
So no assembly lines, you know, things like that. No machine chainsaws, I suppose.
Oh, okay.
It would be like hand tools and small processes. And through the use of those, you might have a soft capitalism that's not quite as bad, but it will always be worse than it could have been, even with advanced technologies, provided resources are distributed better.
Yeah. And he does have a point because, centuries ago there was, English people going to the Americas to commit genocide. And these days there's like
Mm-hmm.
drones in Pakistan, but they're still killing people. Whether you do it with a drone or with, a blanket.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I just really depressed myself.
It happens. It happens. Sometimes we do something like this. Yeah. Yeah. So, was there anything in particular in here that you wanted to discuss other than that short segment that I just really liked?
Oh, there was wait a second. I just really like that he's like not anti-spirituality, but also says like, Mother Nature does not necessarily know best.
Mm-hmm.
Which people like seem to fall in like either one of these like really extreme camps where they're either completely like no religion, all science, or just no, we're all one organism and some weird voodoo thing that is not getting us anywhere either. As if there wasn't like a massive gray area in between those two positions.
Yeah, and he talks about that in the section called "An Ecological Society."
Yeah.
It's on page 10 and 11.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of the last page of, or the last part of page 10 and the first part of page 11. Okay. Where he says social ecology, in effect, recognizes, like it or not, that the future of life on the planet pivots on the future of society. Mm-hmm. It contends that evolution, both first in nature and second, is not both in first nature and in second is not yet complete, nor are the two realms so separated from each other that we must choose one or the other, either natural evolution with its biocentric halo, or social evolution, as we have known it up to now, with its anthropocentric halo, as the basis for creative biosphere. We must go beyond both the natural and the social toward a new synthesis that contains the best of both. Such a synthesis must transcend both first and second nature in the form of a creative, self-conscious, and therefore free nature in which human beings intervene in natural evolution with their best capacities, their ethical sense, and their unequaled capacity for conceptual thought, and their remarkable powers and range of communication. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, that's my favorite part, where he discusses sort of what metaphysical or what ethical framework, what that means to a larger movement, I think, is really summarized well here, which is that these should be movements that recognize that either way you look at it, there is only one viable answer in, an ecological crisis and a social crisis like we have. Like, given the conditions that we live in and what things are going like, it doesn't matter why you get to the conclusion that we need this communalist sort of society, as long as you get there. Yeah. Which I think is very valuable, because unlike calling them, what was it, Disney and Skippy? Yeah. Unlike going that route, he's like, yeah, listen, if it's a biocentric animal rights halo, or if it's, just your anthropocentric halo, like either way, this is the best possible route forward. Yeah. So.
I also like his optimism. Like here, one would hope that the sheer availability of goods, the mechanization of production, and the freedom to choose one's material lifestyle would sooner or later influence people to practice moderation in all aspects of life as a response to the consumerism promoted by the capitalist market. Like sort of that he supposes that if you just give people the possibility to like be good people and live as one with nature and like not just consume all the time, they will actually do that.
Yeah, I think that's something that we end up finding more often than not when we look at, the libertarian socialist experiments or projects that crop up around the world from time to time, is that it almost always involves people who become happy living much simpler and much less demanding lives. Yeah. And a lot of times they're in conditions around them that make much simpler, much simpler than what we're used to in Europe or America.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, this is one of the best formations of that sort of impulse. You know?
Yeah.
I like Bookchin.
Yeah. He's a good writer.
He's a really good writer. He's a really good public speaker.
Mm-hmm.
I like Bookchin a lot.
And I've got like 3 new things I need to look up. The Charles Fourier and the Parisian communes. I mean, I know they existed, but I've never actually like looked into them.
Oh, really?
No.
Yeah, the Paris Commune is like, it's like a very front and center, like very focal point of like European socialist discourse.
I know.
Yeah, so you're probably like you pretty much should know.
I know, I totally know. It's like, you know, the Star Wars. I've never seen Star Wars, and at this point, I'm like, yeah, I'm like making it my identity, the person who's never seen Star Wars, and I'm the person who doesn't know what the Paris Commune's about.
I mean, it's almost like, that's crazy. Like, what if you were a Marxist-Leninist who had like,
what?
who had never heard of the revolution? Like,
I know. I have heard of it.
Basics.
I have heard of it. I just don't care. No, I do care. I just never got the impulse to actually look into it. That's the thing.
Yeah, and what I think the most valuable thing that you can get from studying like the Paris Commune is sort of the impact of international politics on smaller localized movements. For me, it always like puts these bounds on what a national movement can do.
Okay.
And a national movement, in my mind, can always get as far as it would then need to communicate with the international community. And at that point, a national decentralized popular movement, in my mind, almost always breaks down.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, if you get invited to the UN, well, then what is your organization called? Okay, well, it has a name. Yeah. It has a spokesperson. So what's its system of organization? And that almost always includes a hierarchy when you start talking about sending representatives to a political body.
Yeah.
So.
And then you also have to fit into an international framework. You have to fit into an international framework that's hierarchical, and the only way you fit in there is if you too are hierarchical.
Yeah, and you fit into a larger global ecosystem, at least politically.
Yeah.
Where you're going to find allies who are in an alliance with you specifically to harm one of their enemies, and the more you interact with a corrupt sort of function, which is what formal international politics is, like the faster you have to fall into the same mold in order to continue to operate. So like you have to make decisions that are good for some people and bad for other people.
Yeah.
And those decisions are going to be forced upon every decentralized popular movement more strictly than they would be forced upon a state, because it's in every other state's best interest to establish a state to represent that organization, and to play like a formal ally role. So if you look at the Paris communes, you can look at other contemporary social movements and see who's actually supporting or belittling this movement for their own gains in international politics. It's a really good illustration of how those experiments go. Sort of like Spain during the Spanish Revolution, which is like where Orwell comes from. The Spanish Revolution also gives you, they had their own decentralized, pretty anarchist-looking movement that was similarly corrupt and flipped.
Yeah.
Eventually, it fell into reaction, as it were.
But they wrote some really good books about it.
They wrote some really good books about it, and we learned a lot.
Yes.
Learned a lot of lessons.
Yeah. I have a question. How do you feel about his, like, okay, when he describes like a citizenship and this active politics, I'm always like off to minds because it sounds amazing, but also like, I'm not sure people would want to be that involved, or like, would people want to be that involved, and we're just so alienated that I can't even imagine that being like a integral part of my life. Like I feel so like I get invited to like, you know, the neighborhood thing and like communal politics meetings, and I'm just like, oh, this is it's God, we're gonna like talk about post stamps again for like 3 hours or something. Like, you know, these like minuscule tiny things where you think like, oh, this is a waste of my time. I don't like no, and I just feel so like I should care. I really should, but it's don't, and then like I have to go to work and I have to go to sleep and no. Like if we had a different system and it wasn't so alienating, and the probably if the decisions we got to make actually meant something, it might be completely different. But like from my experience, I can't imagine being that involved in politics.
Yeah, so there's a lot about his framework for decentralized like political systems that sort of just assume that town halls would be like popular, and that like, you know, face-to-face democracies will like naturally be the form of communal government. And this is something that I think we have a hard time when we advocate for libertarian, socialist, or anarchist platforms. How do you communicate to people this transition from, you know, government where you don't have to involve yourself, or I guess as Bookchin would probably put it, where you're so alienated from the processes that you don't feel it's important to involve yourself, to a government where every citizen sort of has had that moral education that, you know, participating in the democracy is the point of the democracy.
Like I know if I talk to my neighbors about this, they'd probably like assume that if the neighborhood town hall would just evolve into like arguing about hedges.
Yeah, 100%. And you know, it probably would.
Yeah.
You know,
a neighbor of ours called the police on us because our hedges overhung the fence, so it would definitely be about the hedges.
Yeah, but like, you know, it would take time for like communities to develop ways of communicating with one another, and like people that they trust to do the communicating, or like negotiating or mediating when that time comes.
It's kind of a muscle you have to train.
Yeah, but like, again, that's if you assume that people are going to want to participate anyway.
Yeah.
Because more often than not, I find that people are completely disinterested in local politics, and I think that's part of the sort of alienation caused by wealth concentration in cities.
Yeah.
So people in New York tend to care more about New York politics than people where I am in like a college town in Michigan care about our local elections. Like it just is what it is. People in Washington probably care a lot more about politics than people in Wyoming, because they treat it like a thing that will never have any impact on their life. And I think that's because so many of the decisions and so many of the products in their life come from elsewhere that they know that they'll never have a genuine impact on. Like, we're never going to vote in Coca-Cola changes a corporate policy.
No.
Because Coca-Cola is this huge corporate network that's centralized elsewhere.
Yeah.
And there's no direct impact. I find that, I think when I read Bookchin, I feel this way a lot, is that when people can see the impact that they have on the world around them, it inspires them to interact with it more. Like when you put your hand in the current in a stream and you see the water go around your hand, it makes you want to play with it more.
Yeah.
If you were to go to the ocean and stick your hand just sort of like in the ocean, you wouldn't feel any effect. It wouldn't be particularly entertaining. At least that's how I see it. I don't know. I feel like most people, an analogy, a relevant analogy to like our gardening podcast.
Oh.
Most people don't care about how their food is grown until you teach them how to garden.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they're like, oh, this is something that I did. I had this impact.
Yeah.
I deliberately put more nitrogen in this plant food, and it grew a little bit better.
Yeah.
So it's easy for them to get passionate about it. I think similarly, if they go to a community meeting and then they see a pothole that they suggested be filled, they'll say, okay, well, this is how I have an impact on the system.
Yeah.
And it becomes a big part of their daily routine.
Yeah. And I think like my problem with seeing like a future new system is this thing like, how, I think Maxi said it, people can imagine the end of the world before they can imagine the end of capitalism, and that's literally my problem. Like I can totally imagine, a barren wasteland with like, a Coca-Cola plant in the distance.
Yeah, me, it's government. I can more readily imagine like a United States, like a U.S. flag branded, like generic cola company that's just run by state drones like, for the price of their food stamps, and that's like literally it. I can imagine that before I can imagine like genuine, free, decentralized social organization.
And it's so odd because like, for most of human history, that's how we lived, and it's been so beaten out of us in relatively like short amount of time. Like yes, our lifetime, but sort of in the span of human history, of like recorded human history, this is, how we live today is really, really recent and really, really strange compared to how previous generations lived. In like good ways and bad. Like don't misunderstand me. I'm not like someone who says like we should go back to the 1870s. No, absolutely not. But it's so strange that like humanity has undergone this like huge changes, and now that we're in it, we can't imagine it any other way.
Yeah. So I think there's sort of a conflict that you expose there that he sort of brushes over a little bit, because when he's describing politics or what he means by politics, he sort of is trying to bring it back to like this classical Greek analogy about like Athens.
Yeah, he kind of skips over the slavery with Greece a little bit.
Yeah, the slavery and patriarchy. He just sort of skips over. We'll do everything they did. I mean, they were sexist slaveholders, but other than that, and
it's a neat sleight of hand.
Yeah, that's probably one of the only ways that I break down with a lot of Bookchin is that he proposes fairly simple solutions to what, in my understanding of like human history, something that we haven't actually ever done before.
Yeah.
Perfectly, but rather history sort of whitewashes the horrible authoritarian state of it all, and says, oh yeah, well these were simpler organizations. Like maybe some of the Native American ones, they're decent arguments, but most even like indigenous societies were like, you're talking kingdoms or empires.
Yeah.
Like the Aztecs were not like party-loving hippie communists. Like they were pretty brutal, like despotic regimes. And the same's true all across Europe for all of our history. So to sort of like brush over some of the most significant impacts of that hierarchy, say, yeah, I know they had those, but otherwise, like, okay. Their government system was good. Are you sure? Because they had like slavery and patriarchy.
Mm-hmm.
But you can't expect any one theorist to like put out a paper and it's just
That's
all
true.
fire. And every
also,
once in a while there has to be a hot take.
Yeah, and also like there literally isn't an example of the thing he means other than Greece if you ignore the slavery.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I give him a little bit of slack on trying to describe this as Greece, because who else are you going to point to?
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I've got a cake in the oven. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's fine. What kind of cake are you making?
Apple cake.
Apple cake.
Yes. With apples from the garden. Thank you.
Yeah, I saw you posted that it was your last harvest.
Yeah. Kind of like I went around the garden, like taking every like last scrap out of it, and like all the struggle plants that I left in, just to give them another chance. It's like, yep, this is literally the end now. Oh.
Yep. Sorry. Every garden gets to that point eventually.
Yeah. And then there's spring. So.
And there's spring. It'll be all over again. You start all over again.
And I don't know how about you, but like sometimes in autumn I'm just kind of ready for winter. Like I love my garden and I love going out, but like sometimes sort of like end of October I'm thinking, okay, yeah, it's time. It's time for a break.
Yeah, no, I get there too.
Okay.
I definitely get there. Usually pretty early, I'd say. Usually around like September. I'm like, I've grown a lot of stuff. But yeah, so congratulations on the final harvest.
Thank you very much. Do you know how Bookchin sees like nation states? Because I didn't really get that. Like he knows, I know his citizenship is like on communes, and then like the communes work together.
Yeah.
But sort of internationally, sure. I didn't quite.
Right, and that's what I said. He sort of brushes over this. That's why I brought up that that transition point when whichever revolution or social movement has to like start acting as an international entity. I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really mention it himself, I don't think, anywhere. At least not that I've read.
Unless it's the commune of communes, but other than that, no, not really.
Yeah, and I think that's where most anarchist theory sort of is at, or has left it. I haven't seen very many convincing arguments through this like little quagmire.
Yeah.
It's that, on principle, here, this is what we want to do. The actual nature of the organization that enables us to do that, they don't go so far as defining almost ever.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So usually it's sort of similar to the way that Marx handwaves how to formulate the state that communists revolution through, right? There's a people's revolution and a dictator of the proletariat, and then that's it.
Yeah.
That's like as specific as his plan gets. And he says, well, whatever you do has to be informed by the conditions that you live in. I think Bookchin takes a similar stance, which is that, like, however we figure out international relations or, like, communal societies interacting with nation-state societies on equal footing, he sort of says that's a bridge to cross when we get to it. Which, you got to respect that.
No.
We're probably decades of like environmental collapse before there's even sort of like that scale of
Yeah.
global awakening.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm not going to be mad at you for not knowing how the communal society interacts with state societies.
Yeah.
I figure that's a problem.
That's the question I always have about, like, if like there is a worldwide revolution and all of that, but there's still systems that are like that exist locally but are global, like Facebook. Like, how is Facebook organized if the servers are in the commune of California, but it's used worldwide?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I don't know. It's tough because we have so much growth to do as a people before I think this type of organizing is really even like just possible.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a good idea now. On principle, it's perfect for now.
Yeah.
For any time, really. But like technologically, there are some logistical concerns. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Like, how do we get doctors the right places? How do we functionally build the right infrastructure for this all rests on?
Yeah.
And I think sort of the Facebook question goes along with that. I imagine there's going to be an international like satellite array built at some point. And I imagine its purpose is going to be to provide perfect internet anywhere on the planet via these satellites.
Yeah.
And I imagine at the time we do a social revolution to communal societies, we'll be connected enough to understand that the people who work on that satellite are as deserving of as much resources as anybody who benefits from the satellite. So ideally, we would have a full international community that could operate decentralized because of the ease of communicating between those communities.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine you have your town halls, and what if every town hall could like Skype in with the town hall where like the servers for Facebook are maintained?
Yeah.
Be like, hey, so servers are kind of laggy. What's going on? And then they can be like, oh, we're doing this. Okay, we'll appreciate it. Your potatoes will be there on time. Like, I feel like that's sort of the conversations that we would need to be having as a society. Is like, we need avocados. And we would call Mexico and be like, hey, how many avocados do you have? And they'd be like, oh, we have like a whole warehouse of avocados. Like, yeah, can you send us some? I don't know. I don't have a trucker. Can you find us a trucker? And then you have to call the trucker commune. And I don't know.
I want to be in the trucker commune. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird activities that happen at night. It's just no. So a lot of this sort of discussion is where like the syndicalist in me still gets excited because it's like the only way to organize all of these different resources internationally is to have unions that work that type of work internationally that can just communicate with each other and keep everyone to the same standard internationally. And then like you would have communities of people who are in the various unions in like resource rich locations internationally. And so each of those communes would have like their commune council, and then each of those industries would have their union that worked internationally. And then between those two bodies, you organize everything. Or I guess it would be between those hundreds of thousands of bodies, you organize everything. But hey, we have the internet.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
It's just, you Google it and it's done. It's all Google Docs. But yeah, I feel like that's a much more, it's an interesting future to me. I don't know naturally that like either of those organizations, the commune council or the international like union, I don't know that either of those avoid the problem of hierarchy at all.
Yeah.
But it's what I envision.
Yeah. Okay.
Ideally.
Completely not connected to, connected to Facebook, not connected to Bookton. What do you think about people calling for like nationalization of Facebook? Because I'm always thinking like, what nation?
Yeah, well, it would be American.
Yeah,
And
see,
Facebook
yeah.
would be American. Yep. Nope.
Yeah,
It would just
but
be American.
yeah, but you know,
Nope.
like
Moving
German,
on. Big Eagle.
absolutely.
Red, white, and blue.
But also, like
Naturally.
German hate speech laws, I'm just gonna keep talking over you. And German hate speech laws are very different from US ones. So, like,
Yeah.
basically, Germany couldn't use US Facebook
No.
because
No. Yeah.
there's literal crimes happening.
Yeah. No. They would just be like region locks.
Ah,
So
well,
Facebook
super.
would be owned in America, and
Hmm.
then Germany would
Everyone
have a
else get
server
caught
region
off.
with content lock.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
Yeah.
It's gonna
I
be a
mean,
miserable server, Jesus.
yeah. It'd just be terrible. Is how that would be.
But that's like,
Sort of like,
yeah, that's where I have my
I
problem
don't.
with the nationalization of Facebook because yeah, but also like then like for example like everyone think with China, so like in that system China would have the say on what gets shown on the internet, which they do with
Yeah.
Tiananmen Square, but there is VPNs and satellite phones and ways to get around that.
Yeah.
But in nationalized Facebook, they literally have like all the say, literally all the say.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Okay.
Um, I don't know
I
if
mean, I
you
don't know technology
nationalize
really well, so
Facebook.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it would just be more of like like a State Department conversation.
Okay.
So like, it doesn't have to be the same for every nation.
Mm-hmm.
Each nation, honestly, would probably have to pay the United States
Yeah.
a certain amount of money to like get their rules imposed.
Mm-hmm.
So like, we would have to Germany would be able to negotiate its own like, yeah, well, we want these hate laws included in our terms of service for German users.
Mm-hmm. So like,
and
just
then
banned words.
yeah, and then some like goon at the State Department would have to read the requests and be like, okay, yeah, well, swastikas for sure. German Facebook, no swastikas. We'll go ahead and put that content lock on. And like, yeah, it's very. I don't see why that. I don't see why. Technically, like as a task, mechanically, that doesn't sound difficult.
No.
Ethically, it's a different question.
Mm-hmm.
It's like ethically, am I okay with states getting more control over like Facebook is so deeply integrated into everyone's like lives and livelihoods that like, oh man, that's a lot of authority to give to a state.
Yeah.
But then like it's already with a company, and do I trust a company more than a state?
Yeah.
Not really. I don't really trust either of these organizations, and I feel like they play for the same team anyway. Yeah, so the nationalization of Facebook is like, it's completely irrelevant to me. I don't think it gets better or worse either way. Yeah, I don't think that changes anything at all. If it does change anything, then it's just a more efficient like propaganda dispersal tool.
Yeah.
Than it is now.
That's also the worry, like with the amount of people who get their news on Facebook, to have the like Trump administration have complete control over what news people see is that's not a good idea.
Yeah, but like, and then this is when I start sounding like an accelerationist. I'm not, but I start to sound like it because, it doesn't really matter which of the two parties in America is in control of propaganda, because the breadth of the window of like dissent they're going to show you is so narrow.
Yeah.
So like it doesn't really matter if it's Trump or Obama who are in control of Facebook.
That is true.
What they consider to be news, like the New York Times is still the New York Times. And it's been the New York Times for my entire life. And whether it was Trump or Obama, it was the New York Times with the same stupid hot takes in their op-ed section that show up online. And like, as long as I see the New York Times as being the New York Times, then it doesn't really matter if I get the New York Times from a corporate Facebook or a state Facebook.
That is true, yeah.
I feel like it doesn't benefit any of them to tear down any of the fake competition that they pretend to be showing. You know? So I guess that's the depressing answer.
Yeah. So sorry for derailing us. I was just thinking about Facebook for some reason.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, Facebook's a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it might be a good trial run for, international organization.
Yeah.
I mean, probably not, but it could be.
Probably not. It's a problem. I think of using Facebook as a valid trial for anything, the same as using Twitter as a valid trial for anything. Yeah, they're both literally designed to make a tech tweet a bunch of money. Like, there's no reason to think that either of these are like legitimate platforms. They're like revenue generators.
Someone in chat said we should Google harvest my sleeping in flowers. Oh my god!
Wow. Those are tiny.
Oh my god, I'm smiling. Oh my god, thank you so much. That is amazing.
Yeah, those are adorable.
Aww.
Look at that one laughing. Oh, yeah.
He's asleep. Do they really like tulips, or do just photographers really like putting them in tulips?
Yeah, I don't know.
Huh.
How'd you get in there, little guy?
Oh my god,
Yeah,
that's
they're
so
like
cute.
perfect. They're like the perfect size for like a popcorn shrimp.
Oh my god! I disavow. Okay, sorry. Booked. Oh, they eat pollen. That's why they're in the tulips. Thank you.
Oh, fancy. Fancy little chicken nugget mouse eats pollen.
Okay, I'm going to keep that side up so I can look at it later.
Yeah. A true ecological society would open the vista of a free nature with a sophisticated eco-technology based on solar, wind, and water. Carefully treated fossil fuels would be sited to produce power to meet rationally conceived needs. Production would occur entirely for use, not for profit, and the distribution of goods would incur entirely to meet human needs based on norms established by citizens' assemblies and confederations of assemblies. Decisions by the community would be made according to direct, face-to-face procedures, with all the coordinative judgments mandated by delegates. These judgments, in turn, would be referred back for discussion, approval, modification, or rejection by the Assembly of Assemblies, or Commune of Communes, as a whole, reflecting the wishes of the fully assembled majority. Whew.
Yeah. There's going to be a lot of yelling about hedges. That's literally what what the paragraph means to me.
So Bookchin is an interesting one because he came up in socialism around the time of the very hefty Soviet, like Union of Soviets propaganda. He was. I feel like it's fairly safe to say he was raised on that sort of Bolshevik conceptualization of socialism, which is like tiers of Soviets as sort of the communes that make up the Commune of Communes, the Union of Soviets. Yeah, it just sounds sketch to me. That's all.
Yeah.
Decisions by the community would be face to face, sure. What about decisions on behalf of the communes?
Yeah.
Right? Like you said, representatives in there, okay, delegates. I don't know.
Yeah.
Delegation is sort of sketchy every time.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And also this thing about face-to-face, like if you're talking about, like, I don't know, you need, I don't know, silk from the other side of the world. Do you send somebody over so you can do it face-to-face? Or do you call somebody, or do you, like, does your assembly call their assembly?
Maybe you have to call, like, the next town over. Be like, hey, do you have silk? No. Pass it on. Okay. Then they have to call the next town over, and they have to, and like everybody has a runner that, like, their job is to run to the city limits and check on news from the other town. Hey,
to like light the fires, light the beacons.
Silk is needed. And like the Olympic torch, someone runs a bolt of silk from China all the way up.
Oh, someone is saying in chat, by the way, to make a comment on the politics about this, doesn't this whole thing create a slight power vacuum that allows for corruption that to easily take over and slowly take advantage of all this goodwill?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. It does. We were discussing that just a moment ago. Yeah, it's a problem that we find in a lot of anarchist theory is that, like, you know, you get up to a certain point, and now, like, there's an organization that you've described that you need to define. How does this organization work, and how is this organization more fair? And anarchist theory generally doesn't have the best answers for those questions as of yet. So that's okay. No other theory does either.
No.
But yeah, that does happen. Or that is a power vacuum that you could argue is created. Yes. Potentially. Unless this organization is properly defined and is better. There's a lot of theory out there. You know, maybe I just haven't read it yet. Read a lot of theory.
I've read not a lot of theory at all.
Yeah.
Is there a provision for, like, I don't know, breaking up companies? Like, you know, Coca-Cola has headquarters in Atlanta. Would it be like, would the global Coca-Cola company be part of, like, the Atlanta commune, or probably not, right?
Well, I mean, I don't think you can do communes with, like, global companies.
Oh, okay.
So I think we'd have to chop off Coca-Cola's heads.
Okay.
and then it would be like, okay, well, where the plants are that are bottling Coca-Cola, it's up to them now, like the cities that those are in. How would they like to produce Coca-Cola, or would they like to produce Coca-Cola? And then, you know, if they say yes, then I guess they go on the Facebook Marketplace, like, hey, you can still come to Atlanta and get Coca-Cola. But I feel like the more likely answer is just like, we don't have Coca-Cola anymore.
No.
We have instead bottled carbonated beverages from the blueberry patch that Mrs. Nancy runs around the corner. I feel like that's more likely. Right?
Yeah. Or do it like in Argentina, where the workers took over a couple of companies, like what was it? Oh God, the movie is called Fassenpat, and it's about, what are the things you have in a bathroom? Tiles, tile making company. Yes. Because the owner of the company wanted to just close the company because they didn't want to live in Argentina anymore. He wanted to move back to Italy, and basically the workers said no, and locked themselves in the company and just kept working and kept filling orders.
Yeah. Hey.
Yep.
You know, I feel like it's possible.
Oh, a comment from the chat. More often, doesn't it lead to a more totalitarian organization in the attempt to prevent corruption? But by that point, are we not talking about anarchism? Huh? More often, doesn't it lead to a more totalitarian organization in the attempt to prevent corruption? But by that point, are we not talking about anarchism? Yes, we are.
Okay. I'm trying to be generous with the question because I don't really understand it.
Yeah.
But, like, okay, if we have organizations that create a slight power vacuum that allows for corruption, right?
But by that point, we are not talking about anarchism. Sorry.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. By the point that we're talking about the first organization to fill a power vacuum, yes, sort of totalitarianism stacks upon itself as self-evident in order to limit the totalitarianism in another aspect. So, like, if there's a slight power vacuum and a company is sort of the manifestation of its corruption, right? Then we need a state to limit the profit-seeking actions of the company. Because otherwise you get robber barons and you get serfdom and all that stuff. So now you've justified the existence of the state. And so, yes, everything does sort of just escalate and snowball from there. But again, it would only lead to more totalitarian organization if the organization in the first part does create the power vacuum, which depends on the formulation of that organization, right? So, like, if you can make a commune of communes that does the things it says it's going to do, then there isn't the power vacuum, and then that doesn't necessarily make it lead to more totalitarian systems. It's, sort of like, more often doesn't it lead to more totalitarian organization? Yeah, more often in the historical record, because every example of this being tried, it hasn't lasted forever. You have like the Paris communes, you have Spain, you have Rojava, and there's this weird trend where if you make an egalitarian society, a totalitarian one invades it immediately. Yeah, it's a big puzzle. We've been talking about that puzzle.
Yeah.
It's a big puzzle.
Do you think
how do you interact?
Yeah. Do you think a commune of communes could be powerful enough to like be the counterweight to like big corporations and?
Like I said, up to the point. Up to the point where you have to be the counterweight to like a state. Right? Yeah. So like you can stand up to Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
But it's much more difficult to stand up to like NATO.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, like there's gonna be a military coup in your commune of communes. And something's gonna happen, and now there's a flag and things have gone sideways.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're in chat. And now the question is, if we avoid totalitarianism, do we open up ourselves to corruption? Not necessarily. We need to avoid totalitarianism with a system of organization, right, that doesn't open up ourselves to corruption. It's sort of the whole point of the piece is like, how can we get there? Well, it starts a lot with why are we going there?
Yeah.
And I think if we can communicate to the rest of the world that like the reason we have what we perceive as resource scarcity or like ecological collapse is because of the organization of resources, and I think that's a very good incentive for the international community to find a way to organize itself that doesn't open up itself to as much corruption. Right. So no, the answer.
And also when you, I think, I don't know, maybe I'm being blue-eyed, but I think like in the absence of a hierarchy, corruption is a lot harder because in a hierarchy you can like corrupt the 3 people at the top and you're done with the entire country. With a lot of communes and a lot of people taking part in the process, then you'd have to corrupt like half the population, which is a lot more difficult and more expensive.
Yep. It can pretty much only be done by like pure ethnic fascism.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That would be like Well, I mean, I guess any of the bigotries.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could reestablish a hierarchy along those lines.
Yeah.
And get some stuff done
Mm-hmm.
to like cordon off a majority of society.
Yeah.
It'd be difficult though.
Yeah.
And I think that's the whole point of of these discussions is like,
Mm-hmm.
how do we find a way to organize without hierarchy?
Yeah.
Bookchin has this commune of communes concept.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably not it.
Mm.
I like a lot of the things he suggests, but it just seems all too likely that when making all of the delegations and all of the different councils that are layered on top of each other to make an international relationship, I can't imagine a way that that's done without creating some form of hierarchy.
Yeah.
Or some form of like person whose role in society is to organize society.
Mm-hmm.
I think that position is the one that is open to being corrupted, whether we think we're making a hierarchical society or not. Giving anyone permission to make decisions for anyone else sort of automatically implies that hierarchy.
Yeah.
Do as I say, or I make the least effective decision is just as bad. So, I don't know. It's a tough question.
Yeah. Actually, like, if the commune of commune had a face-to-face meeting and the majority decided they're going to turn fascist now, is there any, like, check on that?
Right, well, I mean...
Because, the majority can make literally any decision about the minority in a system that's purely, democracy-based.
Yeah, and I think there is an idea that whichever organization would be so severely limited in its capacity to organize at scale that wouldn't be practically feasible. So, like, if you imagine there's no police and there's no army, fascism becomes very difficult to execute.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but, like, also, your point is true. If there's no police and no army, fascism becomes very difficult to stop. It's a double-edged sword in that way, liberty. But I think, I think that's sort of where you have to have his optimism and say that, like, okay, well, if everybody's needs are being met and if everybody's getting the resources that they require, then chances are the impulse to fascist won't be as significant.
Yeah.
Because remember, a lot of their whole rhetoric sort of centers on this idea of scarcity.
Yeah.
And that what's theirs is being stolen from them by the brown people.
Yeah.
Is
there research about, like, the rise of fascism and economic downturns? Because there's the Weimar Republic in Germany, and probably Italy wasn't doing too well either.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah. So basically, if we're all doing well, then fascism is probably not going to actually be a problem.
Yeah, fascism is a populist movement. And populist movements are the ones that say, okay, all of the problems that you have, it's the fault of whoever's on top of the pile. We're all the people, and they're the bad guys. And then usually populist movements define the people who are on top of the pile by some common feature that they can try and point out through mental gymnastics, but which doesn't actually preclude people from being rich or powerful. Like, being rich or powerful is fine. It's just the fact that we have these particular rich and powerful people in charge is bad. Or, I guess, in the case of, like, I've always called America proto-fascist, not literally fascist. Because right now they aren't targeting the people who have power. They're targeting the people who have the least power. So German fascism, or like European fascism, targeted people that they could fairly easily smear as like business owners and bankers. American proto-fascism smears all of the poorest people for being burdens on society. There's like a slight difference.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, fascism.
Yeah.
They always say we're out of stuff. And the solution is say, exterminate the people who are using up all the stuff. So naturally, when the economy goes down and people can feel that they're out of stuff, like, oh, I'm out of gasoline. Whose fault is it that gas is so expensive? Fascism will say, well, it's the Muslims' fault.
Yeah.
You know, the Middle East has, like Saudi Arabia has all the oil, so obviously it's their fault. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, fascism. We talk about it every episode.
We always come back to fascism. We need to like stop that. We need to have like a fascism moratorium.
Yep. Yep.
Wait, okay. Society implies hierarchy naturally if you look at it from an anthropological perspective. Like once everyone is not hunter-gatherers and food is easier to grow, humans can specialize, and that's how society formed in the first place. Some grow food, some make tools, some build huts. This is inherent.
No, the division of labor doesn't necessarily imply hierarchy. That's just a myth. That's all. It's just an argument that yeah, it's an argument that like exists from like the 1840s, like directly, like directly line for line. This is a question that they were answering back then. Engels and Bakunin, however you say his name, they went back and forth about it a couple of times, discussing like, can humanity exist with without what anarchists call hierarchy or authority? And Bakunin sort of responds with what is the correct answer. If you give people the choice and have educated people correctly, then all of the people will make the correct choice and share.
Yeah.
So everybody some people will grow food, and other people will make tools, and you'll cooperate with one another, because if you're properly educated, then you know that that's the most efficient way.
Yeah.
You don't have to be forced to do it. So. Yeah, but you would have to have grown food with my tools, and you would have to live in my hut. So I would say share the food or you get no hut. Like, we all need everybody to coexist in order to thrive. Cooperation is like necessary. You can't only grow food. At some point, you need a house to be built for yourself. Hierarchy. Yes, I'm aware of the concept. Yeah. But the whole point is that like cooperation is more efficient than exploitation.
Yeah.
That's just an old truth. Commodification is necessary in a lot of ways for that type of leverage. Like, do what I say or you get no food. Like, for sure, you can make that case for a week. But like, day number 7, the rest of the town's gonna come with their pitchforks. Like, hey man, give us the food or we're taking your head. That's community self-defense. Love that. Love that. Yeah, man. I like this stuff.
Yeah.
Animals adapt to the world around them. Human beings innovate through thought and social labor. Yep. 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 I'm not going to argue with every line from Twitch chat, but yep. I read it. Yep. Got it. Noted. Yeah. In non-hierarchical societies, certain customs guide human behavior along basically decent lines. Of primary importance among early customs was the principle of irreducible minimum. The shared notion that all members of the same community are entitled to the means of life, irrespective of the amount of work they perform, to deny anyone food, shelter, and the basic means of life because of their infirmities or even their frivolous behavior would have been seen as a heinous denial of the very right to live. Huh. Interesting. It's almost like Mary Bookchin definitely had that in mind. Yes. Yep. Certain customs, we'll call that moral education.
Yeah.
It's on page 7.
7. Okay.
Yep. The paragraph above the idea of dominating nature.
No. Ah.
Yeah. The next paragraph up. Yep. All that stuff. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I also like the usufruct notion that the means of life that were not being used by one group could be used as needed by another. I like that concept.
Yeah. Yeah, this came up in something else that had it basically, I think, a use value.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of a use value construct.
Okay.
For a principle of use value, which is, it's sort of how, I think it was that mutualist fake fascist like guy that we read about last time.
Oh shit, yeah.
Yeah, I think he had this whole idea that like you could just measure something's value based on this principle of usufruct, of like use value, and you could translate that to like international markets to let markets balance themselves. Interesting.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept. Yeah. Custom fostered the practice of mutual aid, the rather sensible, cooperative sharing of things and labor, so that an individual or family, in straitened circumstances, could expect to be helped by others. Taken as whole, these customs became so sedimented into organic society that they persisted long after hierarchy became oppressive and class society became predominant. Yeah, which is something that we do still see in communities, like all over the world. Which is the idea that like people who are struggling help each other.
Yeah.
That's like a pretty core tenet of human behavior.
And to bring it back to our raison d'etre in gardening.
You see it in gardening more than anywhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even like tools not being used. Like I know that in my grandmother's plot, they have like a central place where they have all the watering cans. So when you're not using a watering can, you can just bring yours back and someone else can use it if they want to.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think people have a hard time imagining because again, they've never grown their own food, or like you can even get some of the experience trying to run a business of like how helpful everyone around them
Yeah.
would be if we weren't in as much a competitive situation as we are.
Yeah.
Or like how much you would learn and how much different you behave if you stop buying food from grocery stores.
Yeah.
Just that one little step. Like it'll be genuinely so life changing that like you'll start to grasp the concept of living in smaller communities so much more readily. If you never go to market for your produce, then there are some things that you'll never like eat. You'll only eat what grows locally, basically, because you'll have to get it outside of a market. I did this in Georgia for a little while, which is where I would only eat farm to table, even though I didn't have a farm. And I would have to go to people who I knew who were growing food and like get my food from them directly.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it changed my diet.
Yeah.
I only did it for, I want to say, about 6 months.
That's a long time. Wow.
I do these diet things all the time where I just like change what am I eating.
Yeah.
Right now I'm eating all the natural things I can find. But in Georgia there was so much natural stuff. I was like, what if I only eat things that are grown here? And you start I hadn't realized quite to the extent that like I was eating cheese.
Yeah.
Like cheese is just, it's really hard to get outside of a grocery store.
Yes. God, yeah.
So I guess asking someone who's never gotten their cheese from a dairy farm and like had to, hey, do you guys have any cheese? What about raw milk? Do you know how to make cheese? Yeah, I learned how to make cheese.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I made one cheese. It was pepper jack.
Cool.
Well, it was a peppered cheese. I don't know if it was jack cheese. It could have been it was peppered moldy milk. But yeah, it was pretty good. I think people who have never not shopped at the grocery store before don't really realize how different your life is when you can't just go to pick up a bunch of steak and chicken.
Yeah.
And you have to like look for those things. It also changes the way you treat those things moving forward. So like now, not just from that experience, but from every experience in my life, I've become very, very used to like, if people are offering you food, you accept it.
Of course.
And if you have food that you can offer to people, you offer it. And like, these are just broad moral principles that I think society would have to readopt.
Yeah.
After destroying all the grocery stores. So I think that's like Walmart can't exist. Like you can't have like a produce super center where you like it's December and there's 3 feet of snow out, but like you can still get fresh lettuce.
Mangoes, yeah.
Like, yeah, like no, your diet should probably have to change with the environment.
Yeah.
Because you know, one of the basic principles is community self-reliance. If you can't get what you need from within your community, then you do rely on a potentially corrupt organization to get it to you.
Yeah.
So you're kind of trying to minimize that. Yeah. Like a lot of the principles in here.
Yeah. And also when you're getting your food from outside, you're making yourself vulnerable to, blackmail. Basically, our ships just aren't going to move until X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons that I always advocate for like these sort of mutual aid, communal, horizontal societies. Because like, yeah, to go back to our viewers' point from like 10 minutes ago, yeah, if you own all the food, then like that's a problem. But if I can go to the next farm over and get my food, then it's not a problem. Then you're just a loon who like nobody ever talks to or works with, and you die cold and alone. Like,
with a lot of moldy food.
With a lot of moldy food that you couldn't eat in time. And, like no pants because you didn't have time to like spin your own wool into pants. So like you've been farming naked for 50 years. Sleeping in a cave. It's like, okay, dude, you got the food. Congratulations. I was talking about like satellite arrays earlier. Like a caveman, but he owns all the food.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'll just start this garden over here. I made some cabbage. I'm cool. Obviously, that's a little bit simplistic, but
of course,
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I grow all the food. Why would I let you grow all the food? At some point, you would think I'd be like,
wait a second,
that's two people who have food.
Yeah.
What if you get sick?
What if I don't want to eat your zucchini for 3 months in a row?
Like, listen, you buried a cow horn with a I want a different kind of farming experience.
I want to go to a farm where they bury yarrow.
You know, like I don't know which crystal you use. You probably use quartz. Like I'm an amethyst kind of guy, so you know, it's not you.
I mean, quartz is a rookie mistake.
You know, everybody knows.
Well,
you can't just like salt. You can't do a salt circle around your scarecrow and keep all the bad spirits out. Like, no, you need to bury the thistle near a runoff point.
The fact that I know this much about that, it's what?
Yep.
Yeah. The fact that I like recognize that and know so much about it, I could probably like talk quite sensibly about biodynamic agriculture for probably 10 minutes. It's
all the
kind of upsetting to me. Yes!
That's the one I know the best. Like Bookchin, I'm pretty good on Bookchin. I've read a lot of Bookchin, but I read my Bookchin.
But like without my notes, I'd be lost. Like I couldn't from memory. No.
Yeah, and similarly, I have to like scroll through every once in a while and find the point that I'm trying to talk about. But like I know it's in there somewhere. Biodynamics, man.
Oh,
which
top of my head.
Do you want to talk about preparation 507? Let's have a conversation about animal heads.
Animal heads and running water.
Some people do goats. Some people do dogs. Let's have a conversation. Like, yeah. Bookchin, it's a little bit more vague. For me. I don't know why though. I really do like the way Bookchin explains sort of anarchist principles.
Yeah.
I think it really is just the lack of a definition for me at this point. Different people read theory for different reasons. Some people like to explore all of the different formulations of these principles. Right? So communalism in social ecology, that's sort of one trend that Bookchin made. But then you have like the Chomsky trend, which is almost statist syndicalism. And like then you have the Proudhon that we sort of read about last time, which ended up with a fascist, but that's his fault, not Lincoln's fault.
No.
But his formulation of syndicalists was very different. And that's just anarcho-syndicalism.
Yeah.
Then you read all the theory about anarcho-communism. Then you read all the theory about like different versions of green anarchism. Then suddenly you're reading about eco-fascism, and that gets weird. Then you read like state socialist books. There's so much theory out there.
Yeah.
It's all very weird.
And
I'm still answers every question.
Yeah. And I'm still so curious whether the eco-anarchist guy, who's definitely an eco-fascist, knows that he's a fascist. I'm really curious about that.
Yeah, I don't know that he knows.
Yeah.
Or at least I know that a lot of people who read what he wrote and it sounds perfect to them, they don't know for sure that this guy's an eco-fascist. So whether he knows or not, his audience doesn't.
Yeah.
They think that they're reading like a good anarchist article. I've had things like that sent to me before, like, hey, what do you think of this? I'm like, I got bad news. It's trash. It's literally fascist. Like, I don't get that a lot from Bookchin. From Bookchin, I get a lot of these sort of questions where people try and poke holes in the concept of mutual aid and independent communities, like conceptually, with talk of like human nature and stuff. And those arguments, you know, I entertain those a little bit more than things like resource scarcity and degrowth.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not even listening.
No.
To those arguments.
No. Like, we can talk about how we're going to organize. We're not going to talk about how we're going to like commit genocide. That's not on the books. No.
So I saw you were in favor of international unions, but how do we murder all the
And weird, the people who are pro depopulation never mean themselves. It's really weird.
Yeah, it's weird. Their populations always survive this. Like people living in Finland survived the winter.
Of course, course.
You know, it's just that's what the market is. There are people up there, so we gotta send them fresh cherries. It's like, no, like you guys need to learn how to like move south, or you're gonna freeze to death. Like, I'm sorry, Finland, but humans aren't meant for there. Like, I feel like there's gonna have to be some redistribution of population centers.
Redistribution of Finns.
Yeah, like Finns, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to leave. Greenland, you can't live there anymore. I'm sorry. Like except
the Sami, because they know how to deal with the winter.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Only if like you're from a community of people who are perfectly sustainable in ice.
Yeah.
There aren't a lot of those.
No.
Everybody else, you're gonna have to learn to farm on one of this Texan dude's 12,000 acres. That's the other issue with like resource scarcity arguments. Like, no, there's plenty to go around.
Yeah.
It would probably just take more people like working it than just sit and benefit from it.
Yeah.
So, you know, but like if we redistributed, quote unquote, all the Finns, which obviously I'm not talking about putting them on a fucking train and like shipping them to South Africa to go irrigate like desert farms. Like, no. But like, I feel like whatever system of organization that gets designed would probably have to have some sort of incentivization program whereby it becomes appealing to go live somewhere and grow food and start a community of like independent people. Maybe sort of like, hey, listen, there's no need to apply for a visa. You can just go to America and live on that land that nobody lives on and like build for yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe just allowing people to
land grabs. Land grabs. What was it? No, it wasn't called land grabs. They literally did that. Like they put up parcels in the West and like just everyone run and grab whatever land you want.
Yeah. Well, provided you were a landable man.
Yeah.
You had to be. This is one of the first like instances of people getting essentially mortgages done. It's like you had to go prove that you were not a black woman, basically.
Oh.
Because if you're a black or a woman, then like, this program may not apply to you.
Oh.
See terms and conditions. Like, black? Got bad news. I know we said 40 acres and a mule. But like, really? And that's sort of my thinking is like, I wonder how many people, if you offered them like an agricultural homestead, like you don't ever have to work again. You can just have this farm. You know, you just, it'll be your farm and that's how you'll survive.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people will be like, yeah, cool, let's do that.
Yeah. I mean, but by the size of homestead YouTube, I imagine that's quite the market for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Again, up until you get to the point where like you have to worry about international coordination and like, how do I get the internet if the servers in Chicago? Who lays the cable? Like, okay, we'll have to answer that question at some point. I imagine the people who don't want to run the homestead would, like, some of them would be like, yeah, I'll lay your cable for you. It's like, you'll give me the place to stay. You know, mutual aid.
And probably also a really big problem is that, you know, a lot of homesteaders are going to find out that, you know, that their life as a, I don't know, as a like with an office job has not really prepared them for farm work.
Yeah, true. True. That's something. Though I do see a lot. I really like seeing videos that are instances of people who like, I'm just going to quit my job and I'm going to go homestead.
Yeah.
And they just go. Or like, I'm
That's
going
a
to quit
dream.
my job
I
and live
would
in
love to have the
a
guts to do
log
that.
cabin.
Yeah.
They just like go and they're in the woods and they're like, they've got a saw and they build a log cabin. There are those people.
Yeah.
I like those stories a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea of dominating nature. I think that answers some of the questions that we were just discussing. Somewhere in here.
We must emphasize here that the idea of dominating nature has its primary source in the domination of human by human and in the structuring of the natural world into a hierarchical chain of being, a static conception, incidentally, that has no relationship with the dynamic evolution of life into increasingly advanced forms of subjectivity and flexibility.
That last sentence of that paragraph. Until human beings cease to live in societies that are structured around hierarchies as well as economic classes, we shall never be free of domination, however much we try to dispel it with rituals, incantations, eco-theologies, and the adaptation or adoption of seemingly natural life ways. Interesting. I'm not sure. Where in there's the argument for like, how do you get people to want to live the homestead lifestyle and like provide food for other people? That's like a tough question, isn't it?
Yeah, God, yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, actually, it's only a tough question under capitalism, because like under capitalism, as a homesteader, you make the choice, like, do I make honey or do I make cheese? And when, you know, there's like 15 other people who decide to make honey, then you're not going to get a lot of money for the honey that you made. But if you're like having homestead and it's like a collaborative effort and you can say, oh, this person is making honey, so I'm making cheese, then like, you know, a lot of those insecurities don't even come up.
Yeah. And it's a conflict that I'm having now too. Because I told you one of my plans was to like move to Virginia and start a, if not a fully off-grid, then at least a homesteady situation. Yeah, I want to do mine around peppers, making hot sauces and pepper jellies. But I am very well aware of the fact that, like, if I don't make a really good hot sauce that's different for some reason, then, like, it's not going to compete in a market environment and my project will fail. Like, it's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
To say the least. But yeah, until we live in a society where, like, I don't have to sell my pepper jelly, and, like, I can just have the pepper farm, and I can trade my peppers for someone to come, like, I don't know, help me fix my car.
Yeah.
And, like, oh, you fix cars? Well, I happen to make food. And then the car person comes and fixes the car, and then comes to town hall and is like, hey, we need more rice. And I'll be like, hey, man, you fixed my car. Here, I have a bunch of rice that I grew on my farm. Like, I feel like that's mutual aid. I don't know. It's weird. It's a tough framework to think about.
Yeah.
Having never done it. He talks about so much stuff.
Yeah. I keep going through.
Like the Epic of Gilgamesh comes up.
Yeah.
That's crazy. This man.
I was also wondering, like, because he says we can also have communes like in cities, and I'm kind of like, what?
So my guess would be
How does it look like? Yeah.
There are like globally valuable functions that are performed in cities.
Yeah.
We discussed like universities before, right? Like, so the university would have to be sustained for the scientific advancements that it provides to society.
Yeah.
So like you or I, neither one of us would be like so anti-university that we wouldn't be willing, if we had farms, to send a portion of our food for the university. And then we're feeding the students and professors.
We can do like adopt the student kind of programs.
Yeah. Similarly, you know, like I don't think we can advocate for a world without tractors because I think a few humans need to be able to provide as food for as many other humans as possible.
Yeah.
Because we do a lot of stuff with society, and I'd like most of it to continue to happen.
Yes. And it used to be so like I believe 80% of people worked on farms or like in the food production, and now it's I think 5 or 6%. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just because of the nature of organic farming or like localized farming, that number goes up significantly. Yeah. You know, does it double? Does it triple? I don't know. Probably in the triple range.
Yeah.
You know, 15 to 20% of people might have to grow food in some way. But I think if you ask a lot of people who have like cubicle office jobs, if they would rather work outside growing things for part of the year and still have their house and their car and all their needs met, I feel like a lot of them would take that trade.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Yeah. It's a tough question, but I feel like, sorry, to get back to our original point.
What was our original point? Sorry.
You were asking about like cities. How would
yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Cities would exist because in cities you have the manufacturing bases for tractors.
Oh, okay.
And tractors would have to exist to feed the people who build the tractors, but also the people who like keep the water on or keep the electricity on when they work the power plant, or they're on garbage duty this week. Like, if we need people to continue to do those things, then we need people who are growing food in their absence. So you would need both a rural and an urban environment for all that stuff to be able to happen. People being nearby one another is convenient. It's just we probably shouldn't have so many things that are like New York, where they consume so much that like even though there are no farms nearby, there's still the freshest produce in the world in New York City. Like that shouldn't be the case, but it is.
No.
That's an inefficiency. But like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like fashion probably would still exist, and it would probably still be driven by like urban centers.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
Like I feel like there'd be a much bigger emphasis on the university because we'd probably consider education to be a basic human right. So everybody would have to go to a university. And so cities would have to exist in order to service the universities. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's the question that I've always had. And it's, you know, it's one of those fundamental questions where like the answer yes, no determines whether or not you can be an anarchist. Is like, do I think if everybody given the choice, or if everybody was given completely open choice, do I think that human beings would naturally reach an equilibrium with their environment? And I think yes.
Yeah.
If everybody were given a choice, then like then of course enough people would choose to grow food to feed everyone. I don't think we would like ever give ourselves like a free and fair choice and be like, yeah, my next door neighbor can just starve to death today because I grew these tomatoes. Like, no, I feel like every human just by nature probably shares the tomatoes.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then you can be an anarchist. And if you believe the answer to that question is no, then you cannot be an anarchist. That's basically where it boils down for me.
And also equilibrium with nature, because, people used to have family farms for, centuries, just hand them down from generation to generation. So they were really invested on, like, keeping everything healthy, from the soil to the animals to themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, and it's a weird trade-off you get when you start talking about feudalism, because feudalism is pre-industrialism, right? So if you look at the day-to-day lives of like your average citizen, it's a lot closer to communalism than we live now. Obviously, it's not like free by any means, because there's still like this whole monarchy thing that you're feeding for no reason. But yeah, the day-to-day operations were much more communistic than in our industrial societies. It's a function of alienation. But even that's only to an extent, because I'm sure, like, you might have had that farm for generation after generation, but your farm was still on, like, the Duke's land.
Yeah.
And so the Duke could still take your farm at some point. It's just the Duke never did that, because if he took everyone's farms, then no one would be there to work the farms for him. So, like, sure. But there's literally a part that we're looking at now, which is like, which is about sort of revolts.
Many of the revolts.
Yeah. Despite the armies that roamed the landscapes of warring areas, the tax gatherers who plundered ordinary village peoples, and the daily abuses that overseers inflicted on peasants and workers, community life still persisted and retained many of the cherished values of a more egalitarian past. That's sort of the exact point I was just making. It's like in feudalism specifically, community life would maintain some of these principles, even if like their socio-political situation is not on principle better. Yeah. It's an interesting discussion.
Yeah. And I keep like knocking against sort of the outer boundaries of my imagination.
Yeah. It's me too. All the time. All the time. Every time I have these conversations, I'm like, yeah, but then how would we do that? And how would we do that? And why would anybody do that? And like, at one point I was like trying to figure out like, okay, I like cool looking cars. In order for a car to look cool, it has to be compared to a car that doesn't look cool. So how do we justify some people getting cars that look cool and some people getting cars that don't look cool? And, it sounds silly, but like that little point right there, I'm like, okay, well now we need a whole system of commodity and, the measure of like use value that you contribute to society. And like, okay. And somehow the organization that does this isn't going to be a totalitarian dictatorship. How? Yeah, I reach that same blocking point every time. So yeah, somehow.
Yeah.
So do all cars just have to look the same?
Or do we subsidize people who
have cool looking cars?
Or we just subsidize the people who are willing to like drive dorky cars. So they make us they make all of us feel better. That's value. That should be
like, either that or like we need to develop. I always use this phrase moral education, and that's my hand wave.
Okay. That's your grease but no slavery.
Yeah, exactly. I sort of always say, like, okay, well, we'll have to make sure that each individual in society is raised on healthy moral principles so that they will want to fit into society where society needs them for the best of society. And that just basically means training your kids from early to, like, want to help people as much as they can. I don't think that's going to happen. But it's we'll just educate everyone morally. Moral education. And who will do this educating? The community. How will the community, like, collectively educate people? Morally, obviously. It's my hand wave. Because freedom.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that, I sort of have just sort of taken the position that, like, everybody should be allowed to live free. And then working back from that basic assumption, like, how do we make that happen? I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
That's okay. Neither is Bookchin.
No.
He just sort of hand waves it, like, we'll do it fairly.
Okay.
Okay. Without hierarchy.
Fairly and morally and cooperatively.
Like, somebody has to, like, somebody has to read the balance scales at some point if you're trying to make a fair system. So, like, I guess maybe we would have to morally educate people not to want fancy cars. Like, fancy is actually bad. But some of them look cool.
Also, fancy is cultural, so you could just make fancy cars, whatever, is for the good of society. So if,
or like,
everyone's sort of socialized to think that tractors are fancy cars. Those are really cool. They make a lot of noise, have big wheels. It's very cool.
Everybody likes a white panel van that everyone in the community just sort of shares, and you leave it at the grocery store like a cart. And the next person who needs it just jumps in. I don't know. It's weird.
It's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, that's a lot of convincing.
Yeah.
Because red Ferraris exist, and man, Ferraris look cool.
Yeah.
How do we decide who gets the Ferrari?
We have every year we've got a lottery for the most.
Ferrari?
Yeah, we've got a lottery for the most moral member of the commune. Gets to drive the honorary Ferrari for the next year.
Yeah, but then the most moral member of the commune would just want to share the Ferrari.
Oh.
So, like, everybody would drive it for, like, one day. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird dilemma.
Yeah.
I think fashion's another case. Like, how do we prevent high fashion from becoming a concept? Because, like, somebody's going to make the coolest looking sweatshirt.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to want one. I don't know. I guess we get rid of the concept of intellectual property rights. So if you've taken a picture of the sweatshirt, you can just have it recreated somewhere else.
I mean, the thing about, like, haute couture, the value comes from, the fucking amount of hours that somebody has put into it, because most of it is, like, literally, like, hand stitched. So if it's hand stitched, then literally anyone who knows how to hand stitch can make that dress. So,
yeah, sure. But someone will do it best.
Yes, that is true.
And it's always going to cost more money from them. But, like, okay, so you made the best dress. Like, did you make the best potato? Because you spent hundreds of hours on this dress. But then, like, okay, so we assume that the dressmaker is allowed to make the fancy dress and to take all the time, because as a society we deserve to see what the best dress available looks like. And it's artistic expression.
Okay. She has a right to express herself, so...
Yeah, so you have a right to make the best dress. And you have... I assume you have the right as a person to decide who receives your dress. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not just going to make this dress and release it into the commune ether. Like, I made this dress, and, like, this is the model that I made my dress for. Okay. So then, like, what is the model doing in society to make them worth, like,
Yeah.
apart from putting on this dress.
I mean, a model could homestead and be a model.
You could homestead and be a model. It's true.
I mean,
I get the feeling
the drummer from Blur makes cheese, so it's very possible.
True. I just get the feeling like there's this whole culture of like Instagram models.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
You can't exist.
There's a definite useless vibe, which is cultivated. Like, yep.
You are utterly.
Mm-hmm.
You're utterly useless.
I have never had to do a minute worth of work in my life.
Except, like, I don't know that I necessarily require work to value a person.
No, yeah, but
useless.
yeah.
But they still get a house and food and access to the internet.
Of course.
So, like, there's no reason they couldn't just post selfies and that be their contribution to society. But that's not a significant contribution to society.
We're gonna have, like, the communist gonna have a face-to-face meeting about that when somebody is, you know.
I guess that's a good point. At some point, it's like, hey, listen, you're gonna have to pitch in. Yeah, I did see the meme. Let's have a conversation about tractors. What do you know about tractor transmissions? Because your meme was great, but I can't harvest any more wheat. I don't know.
I think actually
it's a lovely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the answer to a lot of these questions is we're just gonna have to talk about it.
Yeah, we're just gonna have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Yep, that's everybody else's hand wave. Mine is moral education. Everyone else is like, yeah, we'll talk about it when we get there.
Mm.
Yep. And you can't argue with it because, yeah, of course.
Yeah. And it's true, so.
You know, technically true, and of course we just have to talk about it. Yeah, this paper is from 2007.
Wow.
Yeah.
It reads more recent, and I couldn't put my finger on why.
Yeah, no, that's just how Bookchin is. Oh. It's because a lot of the things that are written now have been informed so heavily by Murray Bookchin and, like, and sort of his period of our development.
Yeah.
So this reads a lot like how anything that you would read in a university or in, like, a modern newspaper would read, because all of those writers were taught to write the same way, and it was in this way.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's all very contemporary. This is pretty foundational in it. There's, like, the Bookchin type of writing, and then there's, like, the Chomsky type of writing. Or, like, David Graeber is another really good one. And he's sort of like an intellectual, like I wouldn't even call him anarchist. He's definitely libertarian socialist. But yeah, he also wrote a lot. And every time he writes, I get a similar feeling where it's like, this feels so fluid and so fluent. But it's because that's how I've been taught to read by the things that I've read.
Okay, we're getting on 2 hours, and I think Skype is about to cut us off.
Oh, lovely. Well, it's been a great conversation.
It's been amazing. Thank you so much for introducing me to Bookchin. I'm really glad that happened.
Oh, yeah. We'll have to do more sometime.
Oh, absolutely.
All right.
Okay. Stop streaming. Excellent.
Oh, man. That was fun. Fun time.
Yeah.
It's only 1 a.m.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's so late. How do you, like, honestly, if you don't want to, like, stream as often or stream at a different time, or, like, I'm not a night person, so I just literally could not do it.
Yeah, I don't know. Because I think that this was the smartest time that we had.
Right? I think so, but we could just, like, go for weekends, which would make that whole thing a lot easier.
It would make it a lot easier, but also I like doing the episodes fairly frequently.
Yeah.
They are interesting conversations.
Yeah. Like, I'm really enjoying the stream. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm happy to go on as we are because I'm literally learning a lot and I'm really enjoying it. So very happy to go on as we are. But if you if you have any complaints, just bring them up. We're gonna have to talk about it.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about it. All right. We'll see you next time.
See you. Bye.